I took the at-home fertility test and the results came back that some of my numbers were in a really low range. I had a really low egg quantity for my age. And I had a really low AMH. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you can't get pregnant. It just means that I am probably going to fast track into menopause a little bit earlier.
Today's guest, Erin, was engaged to be married. And while she wasn't ready to start trying to have a baby just yet, she was a little concerned that fertility might be an issue for her. See, she had some health concerns in the past, so she was just a little bit extra curious about where her fertility health stood at that point. So she took a home fertility test, and it confirmed some of her concerns. Today, Erin is going to share her story with us. We're going to learn why she chose to freeze embryos with her then fiancé, Tom, how that process worked and felt, and what happened when she and her now husband, Tom, were ready to start trying for a baby. This is a great episode for anyone who knows that they want to have a child someday, but might not be ready today. I'm Dan Bulger with Progyny, and this is Infertility. Hello and welcome. Today's episode is an extremely helpful one, I think, and I hope you'll agree. Over the years, we've shared a few stories of people who have frozen their eggs or embryos. Egg and embryo freezing for fertility preservation is a wonderful option, and over the years, it's become more and more common for those who want that security and peace of mind to embrace it as an important part of family planning. But we've actually only shared precious few stories where the person who chose to have eggs or embryos frozen later on used those embryos to have a baby. And that's exactly what today's story will tackle. So, let's get started.
Yep. Hello, I'm Erin Antoniak. I am the food blogger behind Erin Lives Whole, which is a online recipe website and Instagram social media accounts where I share healthier, more wholesome recipes. I've lived in Philadelphia for the past 10 years, and I was born and raised here, so I've been in and out of the city the entire time. My husband and I were planning to get married in June of 2022. And I had always been really curious about my fertility. I had been in recovery from an eating disorder when I was in my early 20s, and I had lost my cycle for a long time. And I was just kind of always wondering if, I guess probably around age like 28, I was just kind of curious, like, I do want to have kids one day. I want to figure out the best way to, like, do I need to prepare any other ways for anything else, or am I going to be able to have kids one day? I took the at-home fertility test and the results came back that some of my numbers were in a really low range. And when you have a low range with one of these at-home tests, you have to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt, but they automatically send you a retest just so that you can be sure that it is in the low range. And when I took the retest, they came back even lower. Basically, what the fertility test had ended up saying was you should get to a fertility doctor as soon as you can if you want to preserve your fertility. I know I'm not married yet. I'm not ready to have kids right this minute, but I would like to have kids one day. And if that means that I have to act now to have some insurance and work to save what I have left, I will. So I had called around to a couple of different fertility clinics in the Philadelphia area that were either covered by part of my insurance or just reputable. And I ended up going into RMA in Philadelphia, and they basically confirmed exactly what those at-home tests had said. With that being said, I just basically found out that I had a really low egg quantity for my age. And I had a really low AMH. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you can't get pregnant. It just means that I am probably going to fast track into menopause a little bit earlier. So with that information, it's a lot of scary stuff that you hear when you're 28, you're not married yet. You wanted to kind of just do, in your eyes, you were thinking, we'll get married, we'll have a few years, we'll take our time, and we'll get pregnant. And my plan was my roadmap was a little bit different than that. And I kind of had to digest that and realize that, it might not look like what everyone else looks like.
Erin was in great hands with RMA of Philadelphia. So the plan was to move ahead and retrieve some eggs, then fertilize them with her fiancé's sperm, see how many embryos reached day 5 blastocyst, and then freeze them for later use. And now is probably a good time to make sure that you understand the benefit of freezing sperm, eggs, or embryos. When sperm, eggs, or embryos are frozen, they stop aging. So when discussing eggs, you will continue to age, and all of the eggs in your body will continue to age along with you. As eggs age, they lose quality, but any eggs that you had frozen will remain the same quality for as long as they're frozen. So, in effect, if you freeze eggs or embryos, you're preserving that fertility potential for later in life. It's a very clear advantage, and anyone who has an underlying condition or who simply knows that it might be a while before they start trying to have a baby can really benefit from it. The biggest issue really is the cost. It's the first half of IVF, so it can be a lot. And for Erin, who had very low AMH, it was pretty likely that she would really need multiple cycles to retrieve enough eggs to meet her goals. But this is when Erin found out that she was covered.
Yeah, so when we found out that we had Progyny or coverage through Progyny, we were really excited because it felt like it opened up a whole new door for us. I always said at the end of the day, we would do whatever it could to figure it out, right? To find out. But fertility treatment is wildly expensive, and there is such limited coverage of it just through standard insurance. So the fact that we were looking at like doing, a lot of people can just maybe do one round of an egg retrieval or an egg freezing process and get everything they ever need. But we knew that wasn't going to be the case for us. I mean, and we were looking at doing, like, if we were to do one, it could be anywhere upwards of like $20,000. And that's just one part of it, right? Because we also wanted to test our embryos and there's so many different steps.
Yes, that's a great call out. IVF, like many medical procedures, isn't billed as just one thing. There are steps to the process, and each carry its own cost. So when people face IVF and egg freezing without coverage or with a simple dollar allotment for their coverage, they're actually forced to pick and choose various options to make it work. But with Progyny, that's simply not the case. Everything is included, so if you and your doctor determine that a step is important, well, you can move ahead knowing that it's going to be covered by Progyny.
That's everything from the egg retrieval to the testing of the embryo to the actual implantation of the embryo. That was a game changer for us because it just felt like we were actually like, okay, like we're going to be able to do this and we have a shot at having like our dream family.
Okay, so they had coverage from Tom's employer, Salesforce, and they had a great clinic, and they had a plan.
We came up with the plan with our doctor that we would try to freeze embryos because that was at that moment, that was going to be like the best case scenario. So if we can then, we may not even need to use those embryos, right? Like our goal would be to have these embryos frozen as like an insurance bank, essentially. So we would then, after we got married, try to have a child, whether that would just be through regular like monthly testing or doing like some sort of medicated intervention or there's other options like IUIs and things that aren't quite as invasive as the full IVF procedure. But we wanted to get those eggs. So I was someone who has limited quantity of eggs. It was really, really a challenge for me to do. I did 4 egg retrievals before even feeling confident enough to move forward with any form of, okay, let's move on to the next step now. Because at each egg retrieval, I was only getting 2 to 3 eggs, which is very low for someone my age. But the one thing that we kept seeing was that when we did our first egg retrieval, I guess it was like March of 2022. And from just collecting like a few eggs, we were able to get a healthy embryo. So we saw that even though I was only getting 2 or 3 eggs, each time I was able to get one healthy, normally graded embryo. So it was like, at least I have some quality there.
4 cycles is quite a lot. It's a lot of injections and doctor appointments. And Erin, the professional food blogger and Instagram influencer, decided that she wanted to share this experience with the world.
The minute that I walked into the fertility clinic in January of 2022, I knew I was going to document it. I don't think a lot of people know about, honestly, because I didn't. I wouldn't know about it unless I was actually going through fertility treatment. So with that being said, I documented all 4 of the egg retrievals, but there was also, we had several egg retrievals that we were attempting that failed, that we didn't have a great response with. So I would do shots for 2 weeks and then the response wouldn't be great. So we wouldn't go through with the retrieval. And then mixed up the medication and did something else the next time. And that didn't work. So I was documenting the whole process along the way, the highs, the lows, the times when we got calls that were exciting and we were celebrating that we got an embryo, to the times when we got calls that we had to cancel this cycle or this one didn't work out. So it was a series of when you're in that moment and you get the bad news, you don't want to flip the camera on. But I was like, I think I will appreciate this. And I think people will appreciate that I'm not just sharing all the times that we got good news. So we documented the entire thing.
Erin planned to compile all of this footage and share it at a later date, and we'll dive back into that in a bit. But yes, they did 4 rounds of egg retrievals to ensure that they had enough embryos to feel confident they'll have a good chance when they're ready to move forward. And when they were ready to move forward, they found that, well, it was a good thing that they made sure to get so many embryos.
We decided to move on to do to medicated time cycle. So we did some time cycling that ultimately, like month after month, just failed. And then we moved on to IUI, and we did an IUI procedure, and that failed. And after like several months of having some failed journeys, we were just kind of like, maybe it's time that we use one of the embryos.
So they were ready to go in for their first embryo transfer. For those who don't know, when using embryos that have been frozen, the transfer protocol is called a frozen embryo transfer, or FET. And most FET protocols require members to take injectable medications, usually progesterone and oil, to prepare the uterus for potential implantation. Progesterone and oil is kind of an infamous injection in the infertility community. Of all the injectable medications that people must self-administer at home, progesterone and oil is the one that causes people the most stress. And for Erin in particular, the standard progesterone and oil protocol was problematic.
The needle is, for those who don't know, the needle is an 1.5 inch long needle is the typical needle size. And the progesterone and oil is oil, so it's a thick substance, and it takes a lot longer to inject. But we found out that needle length was a little bit too long for me, and it was actually causing some damage into my muscle because it's injected into the buttocks. So it was incredibly sore, and I was having a reaction to it. And so in addition to changing the needle size, we also changed the oil. So the standard oil is based in a sesame oil. And we changed mine to be, I think it was like an olive oil at the end of it. So I used progesterone and ethyl oleate. So if there's ever, you're having a bad reaction, you have a fever, you have a rash, my doctor suggested that we try a different type of oil. And this oil worked a lot better along with the shorter needle. So the 1 inch needle was great. After that, I was just having like standard pain. Like we used a lot of massage gun, and we did heat. We did a lot of heat and spreading it out and massaging right after the injection. And we found that helped just to keep it at a baseline, because I think no matter what, you're going to be feeling some pain from this injection. And the hardest thing about the injection is you start before the transfer, and then most likely you continue anywhere between like 9 to 12 weeks after the transfer. So I continued that one. So you start to get like knots and, like it's pretty uncomfortable, but at that point, you're kind of zoned in and you like, look at everything I did. I did all those shots. I did all of this stuff to get here. I'll do anything, right? For the next 10 weeks, I can do it. But yeah, definitely massage gun, heat, and just we hand massaged all the time. But it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's tough, but it's worth it for sure.
If you're having issues with progesterone and oil or any of your medications, you should absolutely bring that up to your doctor and your care team at the clinic. Sometimes you might just need more information, but the doctor might actually be able to change things sometimes to help you out. It's always worth the ask. After preparing, it was time for the embryo transfer.
Unfortunately, that transfer did not work. So that was a little bit of little upsetting, because we had kind of like thought that wasn't my issue, right? My issue was actually getting the embryos, right? So and I had done all the tests before to make sure everything was okay. And, sometimes things just don't work out. We don't know exactly why it didn't stick, but it didn't. So then we decided to change up our protocol a little bit, and we did a transfer 6 weeks later. So we transferred in March of 2024, and I am 25 weeks pregnant now. So yes, so the second transfer worked, and we're very excited. So we don't know what we're having. We're doing a surprise. So it's been fun.
Success. At the time of this recording, Erin was pregnant. And the even better news is that we record these interviews very far out in advance sometimes. And since this conversation, Erin and Tom have welcomed home their beautiful baby. There are some amazing photos of the beautiful family together on her Instagram, so I'll let you go check them out yourself at Erin Lives Whole. It took a lot for Erin and Tom to reach their goal. It took a lot of foresight to even think about freezing embryos. It took quite a lot of energy and time for Erin to go through all of those cycles to put enough embryos in storage to significantly increase their chances. And a lot of what they were able to do was made possible by Tom's employer, Salesforce, who offers their employees the Progyny benefit.
I have been very vocal about saying, like, I am so incredibly thankful to Tom's employer for investing in its employees and for taking care of us, because this is something that many people aren't able to do because they don't have coverage and they don't have the funds to do it. And I don't blame them because it's really, really expensive. And it absolutely was like, it just took one thing off of our plates when in an already such stressful environment, fertility treatment, and then knowing that part of your treatments are covered and you have that monetary area checked off is really, really helpful. And I'm so incredibly grateful to Salesforce and for them to being on top of it. I tell everyone, I'm like, you should definitely talk to your HR, like get in there and talk to people to see how you can bring this to your company, because it literally changed the game for us and allowed us to do so much more and ultimately allowed us to be in the position that we're in today, which is pregnant.
Now, earlier in the episode, we teased that Erin started recording and documenting everything that they were going through with the plans of compiling it into a video to share with her audience at a later date. Well, now that her journey was complete, she shared that video with the world.
The reaction to sharing the video of our fertility journey was absolutely overwhelming, like in the best way possible. I just realized that if I ever felt alone for 1 second, I am not alone. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people going through this. But in my direct response to the video, I would never be able to answer all of the messages I got. Like, it was just overwhelmingly positive and overwhelmingly supportive and overwhelmingly people able to understand because they are also going through this, or their sister went through this, or their best friend went through this, or, a relative. And you just realize that fertility issues can happen to anyone. It doesn't, judge who you are. And there's a massive community of us out there of people who go through their daily lives struggling with fertility. And I know, it's honestly, the reaction to the video was so, so exciting. And I think just so empowering, because I was like, wow, I'm so glad I shared this, because I think it might, not only will it make just like the standard person aware that maybe they should look into getting some form of testing done just to check, right? If they're interested in having kids down the line and they know they don't want to have them right now, like, why not just get something checked out? But also just like, I think it gave people a safe place. And I know that because I had so many messages being like, I relate and resonate with your video so hard because you shared everything that I had ever been thinking, all the feelings. We did this exact same thing. We'd had to do 2 years of shots as well. And it was really empowering. It was really, really cool. But also just like, I know how emotional and how challenging it is for these people. So I think like, I'm just like, I know that I don't want anyone to ever feel alone. And I told people, if you ever feel alone, go back and look at the comments on the video on my Instagram, because there are thousands of comments from women or families who have gone through this and they're sharing their bits of their story. So it is kind of helpful to see other people go through it as well.
I certainly can second what Erin just said right there. In the 7+ years that we've been producing this podcast, we've been able to share hundreds of stories, and we're not slowing down. There are countless people out there who are now or have already been through these experiences. And listening to others who have experiences like this can be extremely helpful. So we hope that you find these stories helpful. I want to thank Erin for sharing her story with us here today and for sharing her story on Instagram to her audience. It really does make a huge impact. And I want to thank you for listening. If you want to connect with us, you can do so at Instagram at This Is Infertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progyny, you can do that at Progyny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and review. This is Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bulger, and this is Infertility.